From the studios at WMFE in Orlando, Florida, this is the Space Exploration Podcast, asking the question, are we there yet? So what happens when there's an emergency on a spacecraft 75 million miles away? Well, operators of the Kepler deep space probe ran into that problem recently when a scheduled check-in proved to be a bit more difficult than expected. Kepler is searching for exoplanets outside of our solar system, and Orlando Sentinel's Emily Speck is here with me to tell us how operators acted fast to save the spacecraft, and now what's ahead for Kepler. Plus, our home turf of Orlando played host to a space engineering conference. Emily was there and has some interesting details on the future of the Mars 2020 rover and an update from Alan Stern and New Horizons. So, to bring us up to speed with what's going on with our deep space probes and rovers is Orlando Sentinel's Emily Speck. She writes for Orlando Sentinel's Go for Launch blog. Emily, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, a bit of a rocky weekend for NASA's Kepler telescope. First of all, let's kind of talk about the Kepler mission. What's it out there doing?
So Kepler is looking for exoplanets. They are hopefully Earth-like planets that could possibly sustain life, that are orbiting a star similar to our sun. So it's out there. It's a telescope. It's looking for planets farther into the Milky Way.
And how does it go about doing that?
So it uses the power of the sun, to power itself, to balance itself. And then it's really looking for, with its current mission, that it's looking for when a planet is transiting its sun, the light kind of flickers, and it's measuring the gravity as the gravity waves and seeing that. So
it's kind of as a would-be exoplanet crosses in front of a star,
it
makes a difference in both the light and the gravity, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's kind of how they're going about doing that.
And it's found already a couple dozen confirmed exoplanets and like 250 that need to be confirmed. So that's a lot.
Yeah, no, that's quite a bit. So mission operators were woken up late on a Thursday night, early Friday morning when they found out the spacecraft was in emergency mode. Can you tell me what happened with that?
Well, so what happened was they went in for a normal comm check to check in with the spacecraft, and they found it in emergency mode, which is not a good place for the spacecraft. You and I both talked to Charlie Sobak, who's the mission manager for Kepler, and he explained it to me as there's safe mode, which you can have one more failure and the spacecraft will be okay, which would put it into emergency mode. Emergency mode, no more failures. You have one more failure and you lose the spacecraft. So that would be really bad.
Yeah, and let's put it in a little bit of perspective here. I mean, the Kepler spacecraft is 75 million miles away right now. So, I mean, it takes a long time to get those communications out to it. And when it's not kind of behaving correctly, it takes even longer because that antenna is not pointed at the right place.
Yeah, so that was part of the challenge of kind of wrangling this spacecraft back into communication with its team on Earth. Charlie Sobak said that each communication takes about 6.5 minutes to Earth and then 6.5 minutes back. So, that's kind of a long delay. And when the spacecraft is in emergency mode, it's essentially like spinning in a circle. It's facing the sun for power. And it has two antennas, and to communicate with it, they have to make sure that the antenna pointed towards Earth, they're getting that antenna to get a signal. So as it was spinning, they were trying to figure out where it is in space and, catching up with it. And then by the time they'd catch up with it, that signal was already like 13 minutes past. Mm-hmm. So, but they did eventually start communicating with it. And so that was good, a sigh of relief.
And the nice thing about it is when that spacecraft goes into emergency mode, basically all of the ground communication systems here kind of point at that spacecraft. So
yes.
As you said, it's spinning, but also, the Earth is rotating. So those things are kind of, the antennas are moving around too. So to have all of those pointed, Charlie told me, was really helpful to be able to have everybody listening for this one spacecraft.
Yeah, definitely. And it uses the Deep Space Network, so similar to a lot of other spacecrafts. So that was very helpful.
And it kind of goes to show you, because of how far away these are, there's a lot of autonomy that's built into these things, that they can kind of figure it out themselves if they're in trouble, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think, Charlie Sobek explained it as that's kind of what got it into this situation is there were a couple alarms sounded and it kind of overcompensated and went into emergency mode. So I know he used the analogy of like the fire alarm in your house. It starts going off. It doesn't mean there's a fire. There could just be smoke, but you want that to be sensitive so you can get out. And, this spacecraft was sensitive enough to go into emergency mode to, save anything from happening.
Well, here's Charlie. He gave me a call earlier the week to tell me about what he thinks might have happened. Let's go ahead and play a little bit of sound.
This looks to be something that might be attributable, for example, to a cosmic ray. We had a data bus on board the spacecraft that seemed to suddenly begin issuing a series of fault alarms. But when we look at those alarms now with hindsight behind them, it's pretty clear to us on the ground that none of those alarms were real.
So those cosmic rays, those are, highly radiated bands that kind of pass through and those you could make the analogy are the smoke that might have set off your alarm. So that was good. And knowing that, Sobek told me that was some really good news for Kepler. Here's what he had to say about that.
I think that it's very likely that the spacecraft will be able to resume its K2 mission. I think that we'll be able to do it, the campaign 9, that microlensing campaign that we were just about to get started on. I think we'll start that campaign later than we intended. We're already about a week behind schedule. But I think that it's not going to take particularly long before we have all of this worked out and the spacecraft is able to resume its scientific mission.
Bit of a scary weekend, but good news when it comes to Kepler after what could have been a pretty rocky weekend. Looks like operators were able to get it back on track. And as Charlie Sobek alluded to there, it's heading towards the K2 mission. I have no idea what that is. Can you fill us in on what the K2 mission is?
So it's already in the K2 mission,
okay,
which is the second part of Kepler's life. It was saved once before when 2 reaction wheels went out. So they just had to kind of reconfigure how it was collecting science. But it's a campaign 9 that it's going to be starting. And this campaign is going to be it's always been looking at the Milky Way for exoplanets, but now it's going to be looking towards the center of the Milky Way. It's going to be observing stars towards the center of the Milky Way, searching for more exoplanets, and just looking in a different area, but still collecting science.
So lots of great discoveries that it can make. So let's move a bit closer to home. Work continues on the next Mars rover, and close to home being very relative in this sense.
Just on Earth,
Mars,
Earth, Mars.
So we got the next Mars rover. It's called Mars 2020. Mm-hmm. They're still working on a jazzier name, I've heard. But tell me about this next generation in Mars rovers. I mean, what sets it apart from the rovers that are already out there, like Curiosity and Opportunity? Yeah,
so Mars 2020 is going to be like the bigger, badder twin of Curiosity. Mm-hmm. It's essentially going to be the same type of rover, but it's going to have some different science instruments. It's going to have a longer arm, that arm that takes the selfies and stuff mm-hmm. on Curiosity. It's going to have one of those, but it's going to be heavily loaded with science instruments. So including one of them, it's called Sherlock, that's going to be collecting samples and checking the biology of things and using a really cool UV Raman. It's like a laser that'll look at the material and see how the light reflects to see what chemicals are there, what chemical properties are there.
But it'll still be able to take selfies, right?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, that's the important part. I think it's really cool that, we talked about this the last time we had you on the show, that, mm-hmm. It's really important that it kind of has its own personality, right? Yeah. I mean, it has a bigger Twitter following than we do.
Yeah. This one's going to be really exciting, though. It's going to do a lot of things that Curiosity can't do. One of those things is, Curiosity it's got the Mars Science Lab on it. So it's a autonomous lab. And with Mars 2020, it's going to collect samples to eventually be sent back to Earth.
Now, this is the really cutting edge thing on
Yeah.
Mars 2020, because we've never done this with Mars, right?
Yeah. And so this week I spoke with the principal investigator, Luther Beagle, on Sherlock, the instrument that's going to be on Mars 2020. And he said that they're going to collect these samples to save, and eventually in the next middle to late next decade, we'll have a orbiter and then some kind of launch vehicle that will be able to collect the samples and then send them back to Earth. And that's really good for getting humans on Mars, because then we'll get those samples back to Earth in our own labs and be able to analyze the properties and see if there are any harmful, anything that could harm humans possibly visiting Mars. So
yeah, and this is pretty interesting. Like, a lot of these Mars rovers have been out there to discover what's going on. They've had this focus of humans eventually coming there, but my sense with Mars 2020 is that this rover is dedicated to seeing what humans were going to have to deal with when they get there, all the way to the point of where they're landing this thing.
Yes,
right? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Mars 2020, when they set this guy down, they're going to be looking at the site that's best for human life. So where we could land and set up, tents and really expensive tents. And so and then, I don't know if you want to talk about Moxie, but
yes.
That is also, I was really excited about that because so Moxie is another science instrument on Mars 2020, and it's going to be making oxygen. Oxygen.
Which is kind of important if we're going to be on Mars, right?
We love oxygen as humans. So that's really cool. And that's something new because it's kind of like a prototype for something that could be used when humans are on Mars. It's a small scale version of, what we could eventually have there.
Now, it's not the first, as if you read The Martian, it's in The Martian.
Yes, it is in
Mark Watney has it on Mars with him.
Yes, which is so cool.
Yeah. So it's a much, obviously it has to be much smaller because the Mars 2020 is probably about the size of a VW Beetle, right?
Yeah, it's in around the same size as Curiosity. I think it's just a little bit more amped up with, bigger.
So this is a small experiment that's basically looking at it's looking at the resources that are already available on Mars to make the resources that we would need to survive, which I think is really cool.
Yes.
So, and now you were at we were lucky enough to play host to a conference that actually looks at using these planetary resources and stuff. So Dr. Luther Beagle, he's working on the drill that will be on Mars 2020. Can you kind of tell me how that development's going and what it's looking for?
Yeah, so that drill is going to be collecting samples. Some of those might get sent back to Earth, so that's pretty exciting. And with those samples, we'll be analyzing those and, again, looking for harmful properties to humans. And it's also pretty hard to drill on Mars. We've seen that's new. It's something we've not done before with this type of drill. So
what are the challenges that go into that?
Well, Mars is pretty rocky, and also, you don't have like a Home Depot there that you can go and get supplies to fix your drill. So they have to be careful with where they're drilling. And, Luther Beagle explained it as it takes so much time from the rover seeing an area and you guys down on Earth seeing it, and then talking about it and being like, okay, should we go there? And then you go there and then deciding where exactly to drill, and it's very time intensive. He said sometimes it used to be about 3 weeks and now it's down to like 1 week with Curiosity. But yeah, so that can be a little, because you don't want to break your science instrument and you're on Mars.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, very, very expensive drill bit. So, well, let's switch gears one more time here and talk about something that I know you're very passionate about, New Horizons. Tell me what's new with New Horizons.
So this week, Alan Stern was in Orlando. He was talking at the Earth and Space Engineering Conference.
And he's the head of the New Horizons mission.
Yes, and he's the head of the New Horizons mission. And he was talking about New Horizons' next mission, potentially. So for time purposes, the final proposal had just been submitted to NASA for New Horizons to go visit another Kuiper Belt object. He said it sounds kind of like a license plate, and it does. So it'll be known as KBO 2014 MU69. Get that on a license plate.
Not the longest acronym I've heard coming from NASA, though.
Yeah, no, it's not. But it is versus Pluto and then KBO 2014 MU69. It's a little, So that's like 1 billion miles past Pluto. And this week I spent a lot of time learning about the Kuiper Belt because it's so fascinating that...
So let's start there. What is the Kuiper Belt?
Yeah, so the Kuiper Belt is that it is a belt, a very wide belt that kind of surrounds our planets. It's beyond Neptune, so it's further past, and Pluto is on the edge of that Kuiper Belt. The Kuiper Belt is made up of essentially the origins of our solar system. It's been untouched for like 4.5 billion years. So we could learn a lot from visiting objects in this area of space. And until the early 90s, they hadn't really confirmed an object in this belt or realized how many objects were in this belt. So that's why New Horizons kind of went to the top of the science to-do list, is because then it became an unexplored area of our solar system, a whole new world, essentially. So that's why it's pretty exciting.
And so what are the things they're hoping to find when they're out there? What is Alan Stern looking for?
Well, New Horizons, he said, will potentially fly by up to like 20 Kuiper Belt objects known as KBOs, but it's not going to be as close to as it got to Pluto. So, it's going to be more of a general survey than, a close flyby. But they're hoping to learn a lot of things. Like there could be planets out there. There could be whole other planet systems. And locally, we have UCF physics professor
Dan Britt.
Dan Britt, yes. He is going to be focusing on the comets in the Kuiper Belt.
And the geology. That's what he focuses on.
Yeah. So that's going to be pretty interesting. So I can't entirely say what they're going to find because this is unexplored territory. Pluto is like right on the edge. So Pluto is not really a good representation of the belt. So we could find all kinds of things that we just haven't seen before. So,
and it's kind of a bit of a controversy in the scientific community as to what they're going to find out there too, right? There's a bit of disagreement as to what's out there.
Yeah. There's been some talk in the last couple months about possible Planet 9 being out there. I did speak to Mike Brown, one of the co-authors on this theory of Planet 9. And he said that New Horizons is not going to help find Planet 9, but essentially he said it would need to be like an orbiter or something like that. So,
and what is the Planet 9 theory?
The Planet 9 theory is that there is a ninth planet because, sorry, Pluto, you're no longer a planet. And Mike Brown is actually one of the people. He's called Pluto Killer. That's his Twitter handle, I think, because he was one of the people on the committee that decided Pluto was no longer a planet.
Embraced it, huh?
So, so there have been a lot of pretty crazy theories about Planet 9 in general. In fact, NASA had to release something last week saying the Cassini spacecraft, which is orbiting Saturn and its moons and exploring them, that it was fine because everyone thought that the pull from this planet, which we don't know if it exists yet, was messing with the spacecraft. And it's not. It's fine. But it's just, it's just exciting. It's an exciting theory that there could be another planet. And some of the theory is that this planet's pull is so strong that it might have some kind of influence on us, like on Earth. So, yeah, it's I kind of accidentally fell into that this week learning about it, and I'm still very fascinated by it. So there will be more to come on that.
Okay, interesting. Well, keep your eyes on the blog for that one, I'm sure. Or follow Emily on Twitter. She'll be sure to keep you in the loop. And speaking of Twitter, something that you're always excited to post on Twitter is pictures from Pluto, and you found out from Alan Stern that we still have more to come, right?
Yes, more Pluto Pics. So we're a little over halfway through the download, and by October, he said that we should have all the data down from the Pluto flyby that happened last July. So
very cool. So from Lost in Space to retrieving a core sample from Mars to more pictures in Pluto, it's been a Very busy week for space news. Emily and I are ready to get to the weekend at this point, although you'll be hearing this program after we've finally rested after this big news weekend. Emily Speck, she writes for the Orlando Sentinel's Go for Launch space blog. Find her on Twitter at emspec, right?
Yes, that's right.
And orlandosentinel.com to find the Go for Launch blog. Emily, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me. Well,
that's going to do it for this episode. Support for Are We There Yet comes from the listeners of WMFE. You can follow the show online. We're on Twitter at AWTYMars, Are We There Yet Mars, or reach out to me in the Twitterverse. I'm at Space Brendan. Are We There Yet is a production of WMFE. Our theme music was composed by Kevin McLeod. Find more space news online at WMFE.org/space. I'm Brendan Byrne. Thanks for listening.